Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dan Cadmus is a life coach, health coach, writer, and overall inspiring guy. He has an amazing story to tell. He went from being obese, addicted to a number of substances, and at the end of his rope, to losing 180 pounds, recovering from his addictions, and finding a better path in life. The initial catalyst for his dietary and overall lifestyle transformation was his discovery of meditation. Dan has completed his health coach certification through the Dr. Sears Wellness Institute. He is now inspired to help others better themselves in similar ways, using the knowledge and insight picked up along his journey. You can find him on Twitter at Daniel Cadmus. Dan Cadmus, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Casey. This is it's a pleasure.
It's an absolute honor to host you. When I saw your story, I didn't even finish reading the whole thing before I was reaching out to you to get you scheduled. It's such an amazing and cool story, and what an amazing journey of growth. And just kind of has a little bit of everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride to say the least.
Wow, that's awesome. Before we dive into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about rap. You got pretty proficient in the rap world. How did that come about?
I did. Yeah, it's funny. They're two non-related fields for sure. But I don't know. It was always growing up. I had an older brother. He's 8.5 years older than me. So, I grew up with a lot of 90s hip hop that I still, that's always kind of been my number one type of genre of music that I enjoyed. Grew up listening to that and hearing it from his room, and eventually kind of just, high school, messing around at parties, different things like that. I would, do stupid freestyles here or there, and slowly but surely got pushed by my friends. You need to really try this. You need to do this. And then just kind of dove down the rabbit hole. Started trying to take it seriously. I stopped going to school and took that seriously full time, and just pursued it as a career. And there was a ton of really cool experiences. I met people and worked with people that I had only dreamt of meeting before. Saw places and visited new cities that I'd never been to. It was an amazing experience. But unfortunately, just the person I was at the time, I wasn't very well equipped to handle those type of pressures. And so that was what led me to stopping.
Wow. I can't imagine what that pressure would be like to perform and travel around and everything. That must have been really difficult. So you mentioned 90s rap. A two-part question. Mm-hmm. Who was your favorite rapper? Mm-hmm. And then who was the best rapper just of all time?
That's a loaded question. I would have to say, as far as like that I can give you a list. I can't give you top, but as far as like influences in the music I made, I'd have to say A Tribe Called Quest, Wu-Tang, Nas for sure, Biggie for sure, and even like, probably if I had to choose one group though, it was Wu-Tang and their individual members and their solo careers definitely influenced me the most. I don't think I could pick a best of all time. I really don't. But those are all my top, I would say. Mos Def in there as well. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. It's funny, like little white kid living in the suburbs of Salt Lake City. I wasn't exactly in the ghetto, but I remember like middle school, high school, going through a rap phase and thinking I could relate to like Puff Daddy and Biggie and like living in the ghetto, like not the same life. That's awesome.
Definitely not. And let me also reiterate, I definitely was not from the ghetto. I was from, Long Island suburbia as well. So my entire thing was more using that style of music to relate to things that I knew or that type of stuff. Definitely was not any type of like hard living experience either. Have to get out of the way and not try to pretend I was something else.
Gotcha. What was the creative process of coming up with the song? Like, is it something that just kind of comes to you, or would you like sit down and like try to write?
Yeah. So it's actually funny because it was, it would be a beat or something like that would kind of get me going. And I would attempt to sit down and write. But once again, just the person I was at the time, it was really hard for me to actually sit down and like chunk out some good material where my phone notes were just filled with random ideas throughout the day. And that's kind of what I based it off of. And I would piece these little rhymes together and think of concepts for songs. And then kind of just eventually it would flow together, and I would iterate on it and keep changing and changing until something fit together. But it's funny how, you progress as a person, because now that I write, articles and more like long form type of like material, I have learned where I every day I have about a 2-hour block that I sit down and force myself to write. And I've kind of dropped that perfectionist mentality that I used to have, where if it wasn't perfect, I would obsess over it. And it's more, to me, important to just get something down, put in the work, and eventually, you mold that into something you want, rather than every time you sit down to write does not have to be a home run. And that's something I definitely suffered from back in the day.
Wow. Gotcha.
Pretty hard.
Wow. Stephen Pressfield talks about that in his wonderful book, The War of Art, that the difference between a professional and an amateur: showing up, dude. Like if you're a pro, you show up, you do the work. It might not be perfect, but 9 a.m., you're at your table with the paper, whether you like it or not, whether you feel like it or not, whether it's raining or not, you're there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome.
I wish 25-year-old me knew that.
That's great. Well, you have become a fantastic writer. We see that in your blogs. You do an amazing job, and you captured the story of your journey through health, which is the reason we're bringing you here, not just to talk about rap for an hour, but I'd love to kind of get that recorded here in our show as well, your story through health. So tell us a little bit about how that got started, your upbringing, and how health kind of fit into your life.
Yeah, sure. So, I've struggled with my weight for honestly as long as I can remember, since a child. Grew up in an Italian family. You kind of know how that goes. It's all about it. Like everything revolves around the meal, around eating. There's a lot of comfort in that, a lot of emotional value in eating. And so I developed this tendency to use food as a coping mechanism, and use food, eat emotionally. So I've definitely suffered from what I would say is a food addiction, sugar addiction, for as long as I can remember. I just never understood what it was. So I was so heavily involved in sports as a kid. Baseball was my thing. I was on, multiple teams, traveling, that sort of thing. And it was my entire identity. And with that emotional eating and the using food and substances as a coping mechanism, like it had a lot to do with me losing and gaining identities throughout my life, and like falling back on that type of a situation. So, growing up, baseball was my entire life. And so, I always had a problem with my weight, but I was so active. I was playing baseball pretty much year round. So it kept it kind of at bay, so to speak. And I remember even, although I was so active, I was always, the big heavy kid on the team. I was a power hitter, a pitcher. I would play first, I would play third, and everything I did had the ending of like, for a big guy. So he moved pretty good for a big guy, whatever for a big guy. You know what I mean? So that's been my life, my entire childhood.
Played all those positions. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I mainly pitched, and then would come out and go into third base. And then as I started to pitch more and more and on multiple teams, the idea was like, save the arm, move over to first. So as I went into high school and had aspirations to play in college, eventually all that pitching kind of caught up to me. I injured my elbow, and pretty much my pitching career was over. And so any hopes of playing in college were kind of over, because at that point pitching was my thing. It wasn't as much, playing first or third, or even hitting. It was mainly, if I was going to play in college, it was going to be to pitch. So I actually lost the last 10 degrees of extension on my elbow.
Wow. Permanently,
just from the continuous use over and over and over, that pounding of that joint. So, when that ended, and I was a kid in 11th grade, unequipped to really deal with my first experience of losing an identity. Like I put all of my eggs in that basket. If you asked me from when I was 7 years old what I would have done, I would have told you baseball player. So that, that was all of a sudden done. And that's, 11th, 12th grade was when I first started experiencing, mental health issues and anxiety and depression and everything I've struggled with those things. And again, using food as a coping mechanism, overeating, rapidly gaining weight. And it kind of all spiraled into my 20s where things just got out of control. And so although I struggled with weight in my teens and as a child, it never crossed the line into like obesity and being extremely unhealthy and that type of a scenario. So, I went into my 20s continuing to eat worse and worse, which once again, knowing what I know now, I think really contributed to the mental health struggles at the time as well. It's all so closely connected, as I'm sure you know. So I kind of took on this persona of like the party animal kind of guy. I gave up on pretty much what was my identity at the time and embraced that. And with that came the music and this, I almost call it a like cartoon character persona of myself that I thought I had to lean into to be entertaining and to be what I thought everyone else wanted me to be. So I became that guy at parties who people would, I'm not even exaggerating, gather around to watch me chug a bottle of Jack Daniels because, it was this cool thing that I could sit there. Yeah, exactly. So it was this cool thing that I could sit there and take down, a quarter of a bottle of Jack in one sitting. And we would go out to like wherever and I would, take down X amount of burritos because it was funny and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? That kind of like almost the sad clown type of analogy, you know what I mean? So I was this cartoon character type of persona of myself. I started with music. And it's funny because I consider myself pretty lucky. I never had, everyone talks about times getting booed off stage, times, where this doesn't happen, that didn't happen. It was literally just an upward trajectory for my music career, as brief as it was. I hadn't experienced a single really negative experience. Every show I did got bigger. Every opportunity got bigger. Like I said earlier, I started meeting people I had only dreamed of meeting before. And, I was trying to fake it until I made it. And I was just not the type of person or in every single way imaginable. I just could not handle the pressure. And so I eventually folded. And because of the overwhelming anxiety, I stopped being able to write. I stopped being able to function. I mean, like I was always a wreck before shows, but it got even worse progressively. So, that just led me up to the point where I stopped. And that's about, when I stopped, it was about 25, 26. I, to continue on the whole theme of this, just had a tendency to run from my problems, use substances to avoid everything, sweep under the rug instead of dealing what was in front of me. So I moved away. I had some friends that moved out to Cincinnati after college. They were living out there. Like one of my best friends and his wife, they invited me into their home to come live with them. I, to this day, owe them so much because none of this would have been possible without that. But, I thought this was going to change everything once again. I couldn't take the shame of being a failure, what I thought was a failure in my hometown. And so I moved to Cincinnati to kind of get away from it all. And what I discovered there was I was just the same person with the same problems in a new place with less support. I had great support with my two friends there, but that's not, no family, no nothing. It was depleting my savings, just a bunch of car issues, didn't have a job yet. So, just an extreme low point. And that extreme low point is what kind of turned everything around because like my anxiety had reached such a terrible, terrible point where I couldn't take it anymore. And that led me to discover meditation. I was someone originally who was such a skeptic of anything health and wellness, anything, I viewed it as like meditation in the same boat as like psychic readings or something, you know what I mean? So I was skeptical of everything. And so that's kind of just to show you how desperate I was at the time, I finally reached a point where I was so desperate that I just was willing to try anything, tried meditation, and it just started the snowball that has been my life ever since. Got a job at FedEx, getting some physical activity in shortly after that. I finally had something to like, quiet the voices, so to speak, in my head, and to kind of help me deal with things on a more rational level, something that wasn't substances, food or alcohol or marijuana. So, that continued. I started getting some physical activity from work, felt a little better. Meditation worked. I decided to try to start eating a little better, and it all snowballed to me discovering low carb, to things, continuing from there, and led all the way up until where I am now. I continued with FedEx and continued to lose weight and just kind of learning as I went, the ups and downs, and it's all led me here.
Wow, that's really incredible. I want to go back to that low point. Did you know you were in the rock bottom when it was there, or was it something you look back on and said, "Oh, that was the lowest point"?
No, I have I have a specific scenario. It's obviously an embarrassing situation, but I'm an open book at this point. It's I remember specifically being in a McDonald's parking lot at like 2 to 3 a.m. Once again, my coping mechanism has always been food. I was broke. I was homesick. I had almost every engine light, every light on imaginable in my car. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't have the money to move back. I wanted to move back. I had only been there a couple of weeks, just that real low point of feeling like a complete loser, stuffing my face with McDonald's, literally bawling my eyes out like a baby. And it was just like, I can't live like this anymore. I can't. Every day was misery when, in theory, I just moved out with my best friends. I should be enjoying life. I'm 25 years old at the time. This should be an exciting time in my life. And instead it was pure misery. And I knew something needed to change. I couldn't continue like that anymore.
Wow. I mean, in your article, you mentioned shame and embarrassment. And I think that's more common than most of us realize, that all of us kind of experience that maybe at different times or in different ways. Do you believe that we all have to get to that, whatever our personal threshold is, but we have to get to some depth to be able to come out of it? Or is it something we can recognize without having to go through the heartache and the loss and the shame, embarrassment, and things you described?
Right. I think everyone's different. I think something has to happen that makes you kind of wake up. For me, I was so stubborn. I was in such a negative place that it took that for me to wake up. But some people hear like shocking news from their doctor, or I do think that for a lot of people, it has to be that significant event. You know what I mean? But I don't think it's necessarily 100% required. But I think for most people, maybe who are in or were in that position that I was in, where you're really any type of advice just got the cold shoulder from me. I wasn't trying to hear anything. So for the person I was, it was 100% necessary.
Gotcha. One of my favorite phrases is, when pain increases, hearing improves. And change is hard. Change is really tough. And that saying works both ways. Like, there's some change that is so great for somebody that maybe their life doesn't suck bad enough for them to have to, overhaul their life in a certain way. But it also is true, the other way, where like, once you're sick enough, once you're sad enough, once you've experienced so much hell, okay, now I'm motivated to start to address some of these things head on. You mentioned meditation as the positive lever, the first lever that you got to pull, and it was Headspace, the app. Is that correct?
Yep.
That's awesome. So what was the format of the meditations?
So it's guided meditation with, a voice that's kind of pushing you through it. When I first started it, they have beginner packs that are like 2 to 3 minutes long. So, it's a low barrier of entry. When people think of meditation, the biggest thing I hear is, I just can't meditate. I can't get myself to sit there for, that amount of time. I promise you have 2 minutes. You do. You can sit there for 2 minutes. And that, if it wasn't for those starter packs with the very digestible content, I don't think I would have developed the habit. So their entire way they do it is, you get into your breath, you focus on your breathing. They give you small prompts that take you away from your breath, that you focus on different things. And the entire process is training yourself to get back into that breath and focus on the breath. It's a process that they call noting. especially with anxiety, that it gives you a sense of power over it, in the sense of, so they compare it to, and I love this analogy, and because this is the way I used to think of it. When you're sitting there and you're trying to focus on your breath and these anxious thoughts come up, it's not a game of whack-a-mole where you're trying to get rid of it and force them out. They compare it to lightly tapping a feather on a wine glass. You approach it with curiosity and understanding instead of this anger, got to get it out, almost like you're scared of this monster. And so what it does is not only trains you when you first start getting those anxious thoughts to get back into your breath and refocus, and you get better at reframing your state of mind. It also teaches you to live with anxiety as something that everyone experiences, and that you're not going to get to go away. It doesn't disappear, but you live with it better. You learn to manage it better. And so like anxiety is not something that has ever disappeared for me. I probably have the same like anxious undercurrent that I've always had, but I approach it completely differently, and I live with it instead of fearing it and kind of running away from it.
Man, I love that. I love Headspace. I've used Headspace in the past. When I used it the first time, I was too cheap to pay for it. So I only had the beginner kit, and I would just redo it all the time. And today I pay for Calm, and I think it has made an amazing difference. I started it last summer. I haven't missed a single day, and my brain is completely different than it was last year.
Absolutely. And they have, like they call pro packs, which is pretty much you going through it by yourself. And I think there's a ton of value in that. But in building any type of habit, you need a little guidance sometimes, and that's what it provides. I would not be meditating if I tried to just do it myself. You know what I mean? For sure.
Yeah, that's great. One of the benefits of meditation is something that you kind of alluded to, which is you notice your thoughts and your emotions, which then creates separation. It's like you're
Yes.
creating a subject-object relationship. And if you can observe anxiety, then guess what? You're not anxiety. I'm, looking at my cycle clothes. I'm not my cycle clothes because I can see my cycle clothes. And that's a really important thing, and helps you understand that, oh, this is just something that's popping up. It's temporary, and it's going to go away, and it's going to be replaced with something else.
Yes. They, my favorite thing, which I'm surprised I forgot before, is they reiterate over and over that you are the blue sky. There are clouds that are thoughts, emotions, feelings, situations, whatever it may be, relationships. Those things are finite. They come and go, but you and what makes you yourself will always be there. So those thoughts come and go, but you are the blue sky and you always remain. That's my favorite analogy for that entire scenario.
I love that. I totally just got chills. I remember that exact lesson from Headspace. That's great. You've mentioned identities. I think another thing that mindfulness is really great with helping us out with is understanding that we're not our identities. You were a baseball player, you were in music, and you make up these constructs of who you are in your brain. And then when they go away, you're in panic mode, because now who are you? The book, The Untethered Soul, does such a great job of showing you, you just made a construct in your brain that is nothing. It's made of thin air, and you're going to judge yourself against that, but it's made up. It helps you address and move past the point that, yes, I played baseball, but that's not me, right?
Yes, absolutely. That is, that's so important to me, especially nowadays with social media. I think people identify too heavily with so many external things. Your political party, religion, you see it too. You're in similar circles that I am. The way you eat, people identify so heavily, and that becomes something that completely defines them. I try real hard because I think, there's some ego wrapped up in that as well. And I try to base my kind of identity and my ego, so to speak, on my own personal growth, my thirst for personal growth and for helping others. And I think when you build yourself around something that is anti-fragile, or something that isn't finite, that doesn't go away, you have that forever. And when you build your identity on things that are concrete instead of things that may change or are fleeting, I think it's a way healthier existence for sure.
I love that. That is so well said. So we talked about pulling levers. Meditation was the first one. You started the job. You were a little bit more physical. You started losing weight. When did diet, nutrition, and especially low carb come into your field of consciousness?
Yeah. It wasn't. So I think for the first, I want to say year or so, it was the physical activity of my job kind of guiding me through, because it ramped up. So I started just throwing boxes in a warehouse, and then they gave me a route. And so, you're kind of, I was running around downtown Cincinnati all day. And so that continues to kind of carry me through. And I had kind of the mentality of I would eat well all week, and then the weekends I would kind of do what I want. And then I started eating better on the weekends. And what I thought was better at the time was the traditional, whole grains, heart healthy Cheerios for breakfast type of deal, which, giving like my addiction and everything I know now, was just not suitable for me long term. So I feel pretty lucky that I discovered low carb, because I mean, my entire life, not even just my 20s, I was just in this forever state of trying to lose weight, and I would forever lose the typical thing you hear of anyone experiencing like the standard American diet, which is lose 30 pounds, gain it back and then some, lose 40 pounds, gain it back and then some. And that was this cycle that I was forever caught in. So I white knuckled it essentially with the same, the same way of eating that had gotten me those results before for the first year. And I think because I was so physically active, more physically active than I had been since baseball, it kind of like evened it out. And even when I kind of fell off, it wasn't as bad. But I discovered low carb through my, the friends I moved in with. My best friend's wife tried it for a couple months and had great results with it, suggested it to me. And I'm kind of an all or nothing person. So hence the food addiction. So when I dive into something like that, I go in, full force. So I started researching, started looking stuff up online, seeing, realized that it had a lot of legitimacy to it. So I gave it a try. I didn't really know what I was doing as much in the beginning. I probably did it fairly dirty in the beginning, as I'm sure a lot of people do. More processed foods, and just as long as you keep, that carb threshold under 30, you kind of are good to go. And again, saw even more results. And that's kind of been my whole progression with my entire journey for the last 5 years, just continuing to iterate on what I have and try new things and use myself as an experiment.
I don't think we've ever talked about this on the show. And now would be probably a really good time. Let's talk about dirty versus quote unquote, like clean keto. Like the way most people who, maybe just see it on like a magazine or they heard somebody talking about it, the way most people think about keto is actually pretty different than where I see a lot of people end up. So can you tell us a little bit about, what's the difference between dirty keto, a more clean keto, and like how your diet progressed? You mentioned like processed foods and things like that. I would love to deep dive into that.
For sure. Well, I think anyone who is moving from the standard American diet to, full of processed foods, stuff from boxes, you know what I mean? Pop-Tarts, that sort of thing. Anyone who is moving from that to a ketogenic diet needs some sort of filler to fill the gap from what the way they were eating to what I think is where everyone should aim to be, which is just real whole foods, whether it's, mostly plant and animal foods, is my opinion of the kind of like optimal way to eat. And I think the best way to get there is to use some of those, processed foods, keto treats, Quest bars, you name it, Rebel ice cream. Again, I call that dirty keto because at that point you're dealing with all kinds of like, tapioca starch and just like a bunch of, sugar alcohols and things that, are not real whole foods. And they are great in between, in my opinion. And they are great every once in a while as a treat instead of going for the real thing. If I want ice cream and I get a, carton of Rebel, that does me a lot better than going to the real thing and potentially unraveling with the kind of addiction type of scenario that I have. But I would classify dirty keto as processed foods, the stuff, the processed Slim Jim type meat sticks, just the processed foods, with all the sugar alcohols and the sweeteners. And again, I have nothing against, monk fruit or stevia or any of the sweeteners. But when they are a regular part of your diet, it poses the same type of problem for someone who taste that sweet thing, and it tends to unravel them the way it does for me.
Yeah, that is perfect. So well explained. And I love that you use the word bridge. Like, look, if you're transitioning from standard American, anything is better than the bullshit you're going to be eating on a standard American diet. Like, the keto cupcakes, go for it. It's funny. I remember when I was first like really getting into low carb, and I gave somebody a meal plan, and she wasn't very good at cooking. And she sat down in the aisle of the grocery store because she couldn't find arrowroot powder, which to this day, I don't even know what that is. So I really shouldn't have given her that meal plan. So what does your diet look like today? Like, what are some of the things that you do include and you have kept in your diet?
Yeah. So I've, it's been just a constant evolution. I eventually kind of landed on prioritize, with research and with more education and with reading and you land on real whole foods as whenever possible. And now I've even kind of transitioned to more of a like carnivore-ish animal-based diet, nutrient density, prioritizing protein. And so as I started to get into that world, I fell into the, Ted Naiman school of nutrition, which in my opinion, like if I were to recommend anyone who wants to, start trying to lose weight or get healthier, I would recommend the PE diet to really anyone, because to me, I think he has such a good, just a good overview of what is required to lose weight, of just the basics. And he has so many good diagrams and digestible content within that book that it's easy for me to say, show a client and them to understand how different mechanisms work within their body. And when you understand, it makes you more likely to like adhere to whatever plan that you're working on. So at this point, I'm mostly animal based, I would say. A lot of beef, ground beef, eggs. I take organ supplements because I've tried so hard. I cannot do liver. I just can't do it. So I take I take organ supplements, a lot of ribeyes. So I prioritize protein first and foremost. And then as I want them, I add other things in, such as, like peppers, leafy greens. And those to me are more because I want them and I enjoy eating them, not as much me thinking that I have to get a kale and spinach threshold in my system to get, a certain amount of nutrients. I am getting like hitting all of my nutritional gaps from the meat and organs that I'm eating. And then the vegetables to me are more of an enjoyment type of thing. And again, Ted Naiman doesn't necessarily like fear carbs or demonize carbs. It's more kind of an energy balance situation. And I talk to people, especially friends of mine who ask me my opinion on things. Like, this is my version of kind of the PE diet for myself. This is what I've landed on, factoring in my addiction, my tendency to really overeat. Like, this is what works for me. It's a carnivore version of the PE diet. If someone else doesn't have that situation, for instance, my brother, my entire life was able to eat a bite of a cookie and put it back. That is in no way, shape, or form me.
Wow.
So, if he deals well with that, he doesn't suffer from the addiction, he handles carbs well, I don't see a reason for, he's been a healthy weight his whole life. If he's trying to eat a little better, I would prioritize protein and real whole foods for him. I wouldn't say carbs are evil. If someone has the addiction thing that I do, I would suggest maybe cutting the carbs out and trying to, go more of a low carb route. Again, still, I think protein prioritization and real whole foods is the way to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, after doing this for a lot of time, I feel like your brother is actually in the minority, not in the majority. I think most people think they can moderate. I always thought that about myself. I can't moderate. There's no way. I ate an entire pie a few weekends ago. Like, awful, terrible.
Yeah. No, I know it very well. Trust me.
Well, you do such a great job posting pictures of your food. Dude, I can count on one hand like positive influences on Twitter these days, and you're definitely one of them. Sharing your message and sharing, the food that you cook. I'm wondering if the food that you're cooking now is more elaborate than it has been in the past, or if it's more simple now.
Definitely more simple. It's funny because I don't think everyone is like me, where I'm almost like a dog. I can eat the same thing over and over and over, and I don't really get tired of it. So, when I first started with keto, I would make these elaborate omelets with spinach and pepperoni and salami and cheese and whatever. And now it's literally, for the most part, if I'm eating how I want, I will, after I work out, I will have ground beef and eggs. And for like my second meal, I'll usually have a ribeye and some shrimp or some salmon or whatever. It's pretty standard. Just toss some meat on the grill, call it a day. So that, yeah, it's definitely gotten less elaborate.
That's perfect. Yeah. We notice the same thing. We cycle through the same like 3, maybe 4 meals pretty constantly and just cannot ever get sick of them. They're so tasty.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I don't know if you can identify which one made the biggest difference, but if you had a hunch on whether the meditation was better for your anxiety or the diet was better for your anxiety, or do you believe it was like highly synergistic by changing the two, and addressing anxiety in your life?
Yeah, I really think it's like a chicken or the egg scenario.
Yeah,
I think it's both. And I think for everyone, you have to get one right first, and then the other will inevitably follow. I think they're so closely connected. I talk about that all the time, body-mind connection, and just how important it is. I had to get my mind right before I got my body right, but I think I probably would have had a similar like course of action if I took it the other way around. But for me, like finally quieting the anxiety and having a way to deal with the depression made me want to continue, and like kind of led to everything else that followed. But I think it could for sure go the other way for people too. I think they're very, very connected, and I don't think I'd be where I am today if it wasn't for both of them.
Yeah, I love that. The morning after I ate the pie, dude, I was so anxious, so crazy anxious. Like everything was failing all of a sudden. It was nuts.
Yeah.
You talk so much about momentum, which I love. While we're kind of talking about this, what other things started to change for you over time? Like, I'm curious about your exercise routines, or what other ways did this momentum continue building like a snowball for you?
Yeah. So I don't know which. I think it was kind of starting to exercise and train again outside of work. Because again, in my high school baseball days, that was such a love and passion that I had. And, I fell out of love with it, and to the point where I hated it and thought of exercise as only a punishment. And then somewhere along the line, it became like I wanted to see what I could do again. I wanted to push the boundaries and see what like kind of this new body was capable of. And so I kind of fell in love with that again, which, again, that all or nothing type of mentality, I fell way in love with it. And now, when I don't train, when I don't work out, I don't really feel right. It's just the same exact thing as me, your experience with the pie, me, if I don't meditate, like it's all those things together. But as far as momentum goes, I have always been that all or nothing person. So I took extreme measures to try and like lose weight or whatever. And one thing that I did differently this time that I think it's key to my success is I started doing little things. I started jumping rope in my backyard in addition to work. And then I added on to it. I got 2 25-pound dumbbells. And again, like my brother and my father have always been in good shape. And I, worked out all through high school. I've always known what to do. Just never did it. So I started implementing, a couple things here and there, and built on it. And then eventually got a gym membership. And again, it kept snowballing from there. And it wasn't just the training though, like the, even the iterations I took on, like on low carb, like it went from dirty to more whole food based. And then I started, I pulled the lever of fasting, and then, from 14 hours to 16 hours to 18. And now I'm pretty much, 20 hours fasted pretty much every day. And I think it's just small incremental changes leading up to that big picture goal are everything. Because in the past I would have these big ambitious goals, and it's daunting and it's overwhelming, and you think there's no possible way you're ever going to get there. And so you just stop. And when you set yourself little small weekly goals that lead up to that big picture. That's the way to get it done, in my opinion.
Absolutely. The best way to eat an elephant was one bite at a time. It's
That's right.
intimidating. It really is intimidating. I mean, people will look at your before and after picture, which, by the way, like, what an amazing change. It's so cool. It's one of
I appreciate it.
my favorite things to tell people is when they're starting to take a before picture. Don't share it with anybody. Just have it with you, because the visible change that you're going to see is a lot different than even what the scale is going to tell you. I love that you mentioned in your article, like, compounding results, and you just talked about it. Like, you have to get a start, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's, maybe for you, that's walking like walking to the mailbox or something. I had a friend who, like, would walk into the gym, and even if they didn't work out, they would just, like, walk right back out. But that started to establish the habit of, like, okay, every day at 10, I'm going to the gym, regardless if I walk right back out again. And sure enough, they started working out. They started seeing better results, and that's a catalyst for so much other change. So cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I compare it to a snowball all the time, like the way almost like an avalanche happens, where you get like this small little snowball, and as it picks up momentum and rolls down the hill, it gains mass and speed and just keeps going. And I think that's so applicable to life.
I love that. When did you decide to start sharing your message with others?
It was towards like the summer-ish of 2019. I was in a spot with FedEx where I was starting to, I went through their management program, and I was about to start to apply for positions, and was kind of getting into that more corporate type of role. And I kind of, I've always wanted to, like, I was throwing around the idea of like starting to write again, like kind of sharing my story. And because I've always enjoyed writing, obviously with music, but I'd never tried like long form writing before, aside from like school and whatever. So I don't know. I reached this point where I was going through their management program. I was, putting together my portfolio for them and was going to start applying for all these jobs. And I was just kind of like, is this really what I want to do? Do I really want to get involved in the corporate world of import and export? You know what I mean? Is this really something that is going to like make me happy? And that's like, I started to prioritize my own mental well-being and happiness more than anything else at that point. And it just wasn't. It was, I was going in every day and working with my manager and seeing what the job actually was. And again, just the corporate nature of all of it, it just turned me off completely. And I kind of made a decision. It was, I remember I came home for the birth of my nephew. It was November of 2019. And that's another thing, I was always working on weird schedules in Cincinnati. So it was always a flight to come home. I could never just like, up and drive the 12 hours or whatever home to New York. So I was away from my family for so long. I came and kind of got the family experience again of being here for the birth of my nephew. And I was just sitting there with family, with friends, and was just like, I can't do this anymore. And so I decided that I was going to come home. I didn't want to pay to live while going back to school, but I was going to come home, go back to school, and try to do this full time. And I didn't know what yet. I was kind of playing around with the idea of becoming a dietitian. Wasn't sure exactly the route I wanted to take, but I knew I wanted to like kind of be the person that I would have needed at that time when I was struggling.
I love that, man. Tell us about the certification you ended up getting. What was that like?
It was awesome. So when I was originally looking to potentially go the dietitian route. To me, health coaching was a way for me to use like my skill set in the best way possible. Growing up, I've always been kind of the advice guy to friends and family. It's kind of just always been my thing. I could always give advice, but never could take it myself. And so now I finally could still give advice, but also have the practical application of it and the real life experience of using my advice for once. And also going through health coaching was, to me, the quickest way to get from point A to B to start helping people and to start, just helping people change. So I even still, I still might go back to school and pursue like additional qualifications. I'm even, the psychology route has been an idea in my head, but so it was a year-long program with Dr. Sears. The first 3 to 4 months or so was kind of nutrition, chronic disease, all the basics that I've kind of, had down for a while already, but it was a nice, refresher in it. And then in order to qualify for the board exam, I had to take their master certification, which started from November to May. And that to me, like, again, the nutrition stuff was very, it was useful, it was valuable. The chronic disease and everything to do with that was great, but it was more of a refresher. The second half of it, November to May, was motivational interviewing, appreciative inquiry, and just really getting really down into the psychology of behavior change, what works, what doesn't. And that to me was incredible. That was like where I felt I really got my money's worth, learning how to communicate with people. Again, like a lot of things that I had done already intuitively, just from kind of always being that advice guy and being the guy people vented to, but it not only kind of reaffirmed that I had the right idea and gave me more confidence in that, right? But like just the amount of techniques and tricks and just enhancing my ability to communicate. I actually really think from hearing, the struggles of friends and family who are working, various jobs in different industries, I think everyone could use some sort of communication course where they're trained in at least motivational interviewing or something like that, because those skills are super valuable in my opinion.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, we half jokingly say that there's a reason we keep a box of Kleenexes in the nutrition consultation area, because they will be used. I'm really curious to hear about motivational interviewing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a strength-based approach to communication. So something that is, they've discovered through, just years and years of research and data is the deficit model, what they call it, that used to, they used to implement in like recovery programs and psychology, more pointing out someone's flaws and trying to fix them, isn't nearly as effective as highlighting their strengths, using, self-efficacy, which is honestly my favorite thing in the world, previous accomplishments and strengths, or to build strength and show how you can make future changes in your life. But to use that strength positive based approach, based on empathy, based on really honoring the client and that person's like autonomy, and understanding that they're an expert of themselves, that you are not, you're not this person that's going to bark orders at them and they're going to listen. That approach just is antiquated. It's old. It's been scientifically proven not to work. And so that's essentially the basis behind it, is that strength-based approach. And it's using open-ended questions, using reflections, affirmations. Again, instead of, they call it avoiding the expert trap. Instead of, they clearly know what's best for them, and you're there to guide them to discover that themselves and to guide them to formulate a plan to like pull themselves out of that position, instead of barking orders at them, almost like a teacher-student relationship. Instead, it's more of a tour guide relationship.
Yeah, I love that. It took me a long time to learn, man, that most people who need some coaching, they really almost need like a sounding board. It's like you're a mirror, and they just need to, affirm a few things or bounce some ideas back and forth. And at the end of the day, the coach can't run the athlete's mile. Like, I can't do your life. You have to choose your life. So here's an idea and here's another idea. And which do you think you would like to try to implement? And let's see if it works. It's a totally different paradigm than, you're right, like a student-teacher relationship. I love that. So where do you see your coaching going in the future?
So it's pretty up in the air for right now. I'm at the moment shopping around different jobs, been going on interviews for the last couple of weeks, and we'll see where it goes. I'm hoping to land in the right position. But yeah, I'm looking for a home right now. So that's where I'm at currently.
That's great. And you've got your big exam in October?
Yep.
So what does that involve?
So I've actually again, with Dr. Sears, I'm pretty thankful that they offer a study course. So for the last, from June all the way up until the test, I have monthly classes that I meet with, and then I have an individual study group that meets weekly. So it's nice. They kind of give you an outline of the test, and it's a lot of scenario based coaching situations, kind of what would you do in this situation type of deal. And then obviously the like chronic disease and biology section as well. So, but it's I'd say from what I've heard, it's like probably 80-ish% scenario based and kind of practical application of coaching. And then the other 20% is chronic disease and biology and nutrition and stuff like that.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds pretty intense. I wish you the best of luck for that. I'm curious. I'm curious. What would you say your definition of success is, and would you define yourself as successful by your own definition?
That is that's a serious question.
It's a doozy.
My definition of success, for me at least, I think is living the exact life that I want to live on my terms. And to me, that is financial freedom, or earning enough to live a comfortable, happy life the way I want to. Continuing to work on my own, personal growth, and continuing to help others and help pull them out of the situations that I used to be in. And I think that to me is success. You just said one of my favorite words and most perplexing and difficult to comprehend in my own life, which is enough. When do you know it's enough? Is that something you struggle with as well? Yeah. And I don't know. I again, I suffer from that all or nothing type of mentality. So, that's something I struggle with is even like doing enough on like a work scale and a productivity scale. You know what I mean? Like when is enough? And I don't think I do well with enough. You know what I mean? Like as far as as far as food goes, that type of deal. So I don't know when is enough, but I think more than if you're speaking money wise, when is enough? To cover my bases and do what I love, which is, again, like working on my personal growth and helping people. And as long as I could be doing both of those, have the bills paid, live comfortably, make enough to continue to buy the foods that I know are going to keep me healthy. Obviously it's not the cheapest of things to eat right. So as long as I have all my bases covered, and I feel comfortable, I feel comfortable. I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. And I'm able to still do what I love. I guess that's enough.
That's great. That's a really great definition. And yeah, we struggle with that too. It's really tough when you're driven and motivated and you want to go help people. There still has to be a time at the end of the day where you close the laptop and say, what I gave today was what I gave, and that's got to be enough. And it's really very challenging to find that in our lives, I think.
Definitely. I've had to write it into my schedule to take time off because I get crazy.
Oh man. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. It's so cool to kind of see you on the come up, using your passion, already sharing that message and helping so many people, and knowing that, whatever iteration this takes in your life, you're going to continue following your bliss and doing the things that bring you drive and inspire you. And it's to help people, man. It's helping other people. It's just really amazing. And we're so grateful for you and for all your work. What is one simple tip that you would like to leave with the listener from this conversation?
Simple tip. Small incremental steps. Take that big picture goal and break it down into small achievable goals that you'll achieve each week, whatever it is. I don't care if it has to do with even health or otherwise. I think small little incremental changes is the way.
I was hoping you were going to say that. That is wonderful advice. Dan Cadmus, where can people go to find you and connect with you?
They can find me on Twitter at Daniel Cadmus. They can find me on Instagram at Dan Cadmus, and on Medium is where my blogs are at Dan_Cadmus.
That is awesome. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Like I said, man, we are so grateful for you and for your journey. Not always the easiest times, and you're right, like not that easy to share afterwards, but for you to address it and to come out the other side and not be ashamed or embarrassed by it and to actually put it out into the world, I think is incredible. Your writing's amazing. Your message is amazing. We're just so grateful for you and everything you've done, and for you to come onto our show today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Casey. Seriously, that means a lot. And thank you for having me. It's been a blast. I could talk about this forever. So thank you so much for having me on.
Dude, you are more than welcome to come back anytime when you're getting up and running. Let's have you back on and discuss what's gone on since today. It'd be great.
Awesome. I'd love to.
That would be great. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.